Hi, everyone. Welcome to Active Love Adoptions podcast. I'm your host, Makenzie Love. On this week's episode, my husband, Ryan Love, and I will be discussing our unique adoption journey. To share some context on the podcast you're about to listen to, Ryan and I married shortly after we placed our son for adoption nearly 11 years ago. And since we've had 4 children of our own, we realize our adoption story and our relationship may be unique, which is why we're excited to share it with you, in hopes that some of our listeners may identify and benefit from what's discussed. There's a lot to unpack here, and we appreciate you following along. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, we weren't able to go into detail or touch on specifics. So if you have any questions for Ryan or I, or you're interested in the process of adoption, please feel free to reach out to Makenzie, Makenzie, at activeloveadoptions.com. Welcome to the Active Love Adoptions family. I remember going over to her house, and she is a hairdresser. And so I just sat in her salon and was talking to her. And, my birth son had hurt my rib really bad, and I was in so much pain. And she was like, "What can I do to help you? Like, how can I help you? I feel so bad." And that day is actually the day that I went into labor.
Your water broke. And I remember receiving that phone call. I think I was heading there already for some reason.
Yeah, right? I think we were all meeting together.
And so, the timing was just kind of perfect. Everything kind of just worked out. And we weren't too far from the hospital.
I actually drove with mom to the hospital. I remember that vividly because the adoptive mom threw me all these towels and was like, "You're going to need these." And I just remember sitting on a bunch of towels in my mom's front seat of her Suburban, trying not to get anything anywhere and just being like, "Hurry, Mom, let's go." And you were falling behind us in your car because you like pulled in right as we were pulling out. And so we were just like, "Her water broke, let's go." And so I just remember in Orem, that back street that has like 10 speed bumps. I have no idea why my mom chose to go down that road, but every speed bump, it was just like, "Mom, what are you doing?"
And they were bigger that day than they ever had.
Oh yeah, it was like the most uncomfortable drive I've ever had in my entire life. So we finally got to the hospital, and Dr. Thorpe was my doctor, and I absolutely love him. He was he had long hair. I remember him specifically. He had really long hair. He came in with like Crocs on, just chill. Yeah. Just like, "Hey, you're about to have a baby?" And
he was a dude.
Yeah, he was. He was awesome.
Total dude.
I loved him. And I remember feeling so much peace that day. I you imagine that day, it's your first baby. You're not going home with your baby. And so it's really nerve-wracking. And I just remember feeling so much peace, and I was not expecting that. And, up until I didn't feel much peace until I got my epidural. Once I got my epidural, I was feeling good.
There was a lot of peace then.
Yeah. Then I felt a lot of peace. I was good. No, I, ended up having him within 2 or 3 hours. It was a very, very fast labor, and the nurses came in, and we decided to have the adoptive parents wait while I gave birth so we could have that time together.
Yeah. And I think for us at that time, that was an important decision. And those who place their children for adoption, there's different ways to do things. And our way certainly isn't the right way. But I remember thinking, this is a really big decision for us.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that I'm making the right decision. And so do you.
Yeah.
And so that time for us was important. Not to say that if they're in there, it'd be less important.
Right.
But I think it aided in allowing us to be with each other and feeling the feelings.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And those emotions, because we didn't know what to expect. Right.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the decision there. And I think it was really good for us to have that.
Agree.
I remember Mom was there.
Yep. Mom was there.
And you mentioned the peace in that room. And it felt right. Everything felt right. Yeah. Everything with your delivery, everything with the doctor.
Yeah, everything.
Conversations that we had. Everything just felt good and peaceful. I remember that feeling. Yeah. And it was good because we didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
That was our first child. And we were doing something, we were making a decision that was an extremely mature decision. And we didn't know how we were going to react to that.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of components. There's a lot of things going on in our minds at that time. But for us to have that time together, with mom's help was really important for us.
Yeah.
And I will always cherish that time that we had with you. And I know that I think we had a day or two of just being with our child.
Yeah.
Right. And again, that was a decision that we wanted to make as well.
Yeah.
We allowed the adoptive parents to come in afterwards
and their family.
have that interaction. But it was important for us to have that next few days to be with our child.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that day was the first time I had ever seen you show true emotion, which was kind of like shocking for me because up to that point we had been like platonic with each other, but to see you show so much emotion and to that was the first time you were actually vulnerable with me. I think you kind of put on like this macho man, like I'm here, to protect you and to protect our baby. We're doing the right thing. But I think that day was the first time I ever saw you kind of I think that was the first day I think that was really the first day that I felt so much unconditional love for you. And my heart hurt for you too, because I think I saw a different side to you of, wow, this isn't just some guy. This is, my birth son's dad, who I care about very, very much. And he's a real person who's emotional and has no one either. You had nobody. I think that's what broke my heart the most. It was like, I knew I had support. I knew that I was leaving a few days after giving birth to go back with my parents in California. And I think, we both felt so much that day, and we were both so worried about what was going to happen. But at the same time, we were also just okay being there and living it hour by hour. There were things that happened that, we had to push the outside world away, and we had to together make that decision. And you and I knew that was the right decision. And so even though all these things are being thrown at us, at the end of the day, I remember sitting there when the social worker came. Again, it was all new to me. I had no idea what was going to happen, what we'd be signing. And I just remember sitting in that room with you and my mom, and I'm pretty sure Aunt Gayleen was there and a few other people that, were really close with me. And we signed away those papers, or we signed those papers. And it was a very emotional time for us. And I think that was something where we just got like a huge wave of emotion, and it kind of hit us, the reality of what was happening. And I just remember that day being extremely emotional, but also feeling, again, that peace of knowing that he's going exactly where he's supposed to be. And I truly do feel that I was, but you can believe whatever you want. I'm not very, I wouldn't say religious, but I do believe that before we came here, that we made contracts with each other. And I truly believe that I was friends with them up there. And I said, hey, we're going to do this together. And I know you're going to have this difficulty, and this is going to be my difficulty, and we're going to help each other. And I truly believe that that was a promise we made to each other, because it just felt so right. A question that you and I, like everyone we meet, asks us, well, because you guys are together, do you regret placing your son for adoption?
It may appear to be an insensitive question. And let me back up just a little bit so that those who are listening kind of understand where my perspective is coming from on this. Currently, we have 5 children, 4 of our own, and then our birth son as well. And you and I are married.
Yeah.
And so it's not odd to me that people ask that, do you regret your decision now that you're together and he has 4, blood brothers and sisters?
Yeah.
But I understand it comes from a place of ignorance, and not in the negative sense of ignorance, and ignorance in the fact that they just don't know.
Yeah.
And they're curious.
Yeah.
And so it's, I've had to work through that question a little bit over time. And as I've matured and as the years have gone by, I don't take it negatively anymore.
Sure.
But the answer to me is also the same. And what's interesting is that, as we've told this story about us not being together, now we're placing our child for adoption. Well, and now that you know that we're obviously married and happily married and absolutely
which is a whole other story
with, with amazing children at home, do you regret that decision of placing your child? And the answer is absolutely not for me. And the reason being is because what I have now, with you as my spouse for the rest of my life, and amazing children at home, and the relationship that we have with our birth son and his parents is something that I would never want to give up. But it's also something that probably wouldn't have happened if we had kept our child.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I can't say that I regret it because I love my life right now.
Yeah.
I love you more than anything.
Me too.
And I love all of our children. And I'm happy. I know you're happy. But more importantly, I know our son is happy.
Yeah.
And, he has 4 parents who love him unconditionally, 2 of which I would want to be my parents.
Same.
And 4 siblings that live with us at home who love him unconditionally.
Yeah,
and it's an open adoption. I think that we mentioned that. And so we have the ability to see him, and we see him often. As a matter of fact, we had a sleepover.
Yeah, our first sleepover.
And that might seem odd to people, and people probably
I'm
have
sure
a lot of questions regarding that.
Sure they do.
And maybe a little bit later in the podcast, we can talk about that relationship and how that works. But to answer this initial question, as far as regret, absolutely not. Because what I have right now is something that I've always dreamed of.
Yeah. And I think that if we would have kept him and I would have been a single mom, I probably would have had a lot of resentment. And I don't know if we would, have the relationship that we do now. Just like what you said, I think there is a lot that goes into it, and no one knows what could have happened with us, what could have happened with him. I think it all worked out exactly how it was supposed to work out.
Right.
And, I didn't mean to, skip over the hospital experience either, because I think the hardest part for a birth mom, for me, was leaving the hospital. Without your child. Sorry. It was my first child. It was my first time giving birth. I had no idea the love I would feel for such like a tiny little human. Something that is very dear to my heart. I had a nurse that was actually friends with the adoptive mom. Yeah. I kind of feel like she was my angel that day. But she came into my room right after I signed papers, and my mom had to go I think mom went to go get us lunch, and you were gone. And so it was just me in the hotel room, and I actually
in the hospital room, right?
The hotel. Yeah, the hospital. I mean, it's kind of like a hotel, right? Sure. I'm staying there, paying a lot of money to stay there. But I actually sat there and read a letter that I had written to myself. It was kind of like out of a movie, honestly. I actually have the original letter right here, and it's just a letter I wrote to myself. And the first, I don't know if I could even read this without bawling my eyes out, but it says, "You're probably looking at our son right now. Sorry, dear self, you're probably looking at our son right now. He's probably perfect in every way. I'm trying to think about what our emotions are like right now. Now that he's actually here and we can see what's been moving around inside of us. This baby is a miracle that you made. And Heavenly Father had him come to this earth for a reason. As much as you'd love to take care of him and raise him, there are parents such as blank and blank that are ready right now to give him the best life possible. Let them do that.
Think about how great his life will be and how spoiled he will be. He'll have a mother and a father that love him very much. Think about how much you are blessing two people with a family. You are bringing them the greatest joy that you can ever give. Kens, you deserve a fresh start. Go to school like you want to. Do all the things that you've been wanting to do. And don't let fear stop you.
I wish I could come over there and give you a hug.
I know. I wrote this letter to myself because I knew it was going to be hard. But I knew I made a promise to the adoptive parents, and I knew that what I was doing is right, and I didn't want to, get cold feet last second. And so I wrote this, and, I'll just read this last part. He's in good hands. Don't worry about him. He's going to be so happy. Spend one-on-one time with him in the hospital before you let him go, and know that this isn't the last time you're going to see him. I love you. You are loved. You can do this, and you have people supporting you 100%. Love, me. And I swear, right after I was done reading that letter, that nurse came in, and she actually handed me this bear, which I've kept this entire time. My kids play with it now. They have no idea the significance it really is to me. But she wrote me a really nice letter, and at the end, she handed me this bear and said, no mother should ever leave the hospital empty-handed. So I want you to hold on to him and have him watch over you for the next few days. Sorry. And she gave me the longest hug I've ever had in my life. With all that said, yeah, I don't regret it. It's up to you to create your own reality. I could have been sad. I could have let this consume my entire life, but instead I chose to go to school for a whole 3 or 4 weeks, I think, at UVU. But I got registered. I went and did it. I had good intentions. And then I got a really fun job. And you know me, I'm all about fun. So well, before I go there, I held on to this bear. I was willed out of the hospital. I was so emotional because I read that letter. The nurse gave me this bear, and it was just too much for me. And, the nurse comes in and says, would you like to hand off, your son to his adoptive mom? And I said, I just can't. I'm so sorry. I would love to. Please let the adoptive mom know that I love her and that this has nothing to do with her. I'm just going through a lot. And so my mom wheeled me out. I was holding my bear. As I was being wheeled out, we looked over in the nursery, and the adoptive parents were in there with our birth son. And again, I just felt so much peace. I felt lost and I was sad. But then again, there was an answer right there, just knowing that I was doing the right thing. And I felt so much peace. And I was wheeled out of there, and I looked at my mom and I said, I want to go to Build-A-Bear. And she starts laughing. She's like, no, I'm taking you home. You just gave birth. And I said, Mom, Ryan has nobody. Ryan has no one, and I don't want him to feel alone. And I said, this nurse gave me this bear. I want to go make Ryan a bear that he can keep. And so my mom, she knows how I am, and she knew that I was going to win no matter what. So she took me to the mall, and we went to Build-A-Bear, and I built you a bear.
When you got me a silver necklace as well.
Oh yeah, and I went to get you a silver necklace that had his initials on it.
Right,
and you still wear it.
Almost 11 years now, and
yep, every single day. He doesn't take it off.
Birth date on here.
Yeah, he sleeps in it and everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so I brought you those 2 presents, and I said, I know we're not going to be together, but you're always going to be someone that's very special to me. And I'm pretty sure I think you came over to my house actually, and my mom had just left, and we just sat there and we just held each other and cried on the bed. And, again, we looked at each other. We knew that we had done something that, in our minds, we couldn't go back from. Like, we could never be together now because we made that decision. And that's when you were doing wildland firefighting, and I think like a few days later you were gone.
Yeah, we parted ways fairly quickly after that experience.
Yeah, you left, and then I went.
Remain in contact for the next 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, you didn't have service, and I just needed some time. And I went to California with my parents. My dad, I think, was graduating test pilot school or something at that time. So I went, and I was, And then I came back, and I got that job where I was traveling all over the country, and I kind of did my own thing. I was dating, just living my life, just trying to move on from that. I did register, like I said, for UVU, and I did try, the whole school thing. Just wasn't my thing. So I took that job, and I was gone, and I think I felt a lot of freedom. I did a ton of healing. I did things that I never thought I would do, like hiking. And, I got out of my comfort zone. I wasn't that shy little girl anymore. I felt the confidence to do what I wanted to do and go find myself. And I think that was a promise I made to myself, that if I was going to make this sacrifice, I owed it to my birth son to make my life better and to go find myself and to be more confident and to work through all of the hard things that I went through in my childhood, because he deserved that. And that he was my main priority at that time.
I think both of us felt liberated and trying to find out who we were.
Yeah.
And allowing the opportunity to do those things that we've never done before.
Yeah.
And to develop as human beings.
I think we realized how fragile and how special life really is, and that at any point in time, something that big could happen. And so we chose to go and live our best lives.
Right. And though we were apart, though we weren't in communication, I think you had mentioned it previously when we had signed those official contracts in the hospital, immediately we had a connection.
Yeah.
You and I had something that no one else could share with us, right? That's an experience that you and I will only have.
Yeah.
And we did go our separate ways, but we still had that connection. And so I remember thinking about you often.
Oh yeah.
When I was gone doing wildland firefighting, and I'd hope that you were thinking of me as well.
Of course,
I'm sure
I was.
that you were.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I just want to talk to her. And sometimes I didn't have service.
Yeah.
But when I was done with that season, it must have been 4 or 5 months later. I think that I reached out to you, and I was home at that point, and I think you were back in Utah as well.
Yeah.
And just wanted to meet up for dinner and just to see how you were doing.
Yeah.
And I think, I think people can put together.
Yeah. The rest is history.
What happened from there?
It was actually 1.5 years later, actually, because you went and did fire or wildland for that entire summer. And then you went back to California. Do you remember that?
That's right.
For a certain amount of time. And I was actually still working. And then that's when I got my job. And I traveled that summer, and you went and did wildland firefighting. And I think we kept in touch, here and there, just checking in on each other, nothing too serious. But then, that second summer after we had him, you asked me out to dinner, and I was like, oh no, I don't know if this is a good idea.
Well, there was some sort of an undeniable force that I was feeling.
Yeah, I think we both felt that. I mean, we had dated other people, and it just didn't feel right.
Right.
And it just never felt the same.
Which is so odd, because I feel like our relationship previously was, we were fighting that possibly. And at this point, I think that you and I had been through that experience, and we're probably mature enough to understand, maybe we just see where it goes. Maybe we spend some time together. Maybe we communicate and just, be with each other.
Yeah.
And
without the pressure of having to decide what to do with our son.
Right.
And big traumatic events.
I really enjoying that time with you.
Yeah. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the rest is history.
The rest is history.
We ended up moving in together, and
you made me marry you.
oh wait, but we got pregnant again. We forgot about that. And that was extremely hard for me emotionally too, because I was like, okay.
Well, we weren't married.
Yeah, we weren't married. So what am I supposed to place this child to?
I think an important point to bring up is people, another question that people commonly ask is how does that work? The open adoption work with the adoptive parents.
Yeah.
And, and that was something that we were unsure of when we first started thinking about open adoption.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was that common at the time, but we had heard that for the child, it could potentially be healthier.
Yeah.
That he understands where he came from and has that relationship with his birth parents.
Right. And I think I initially wanted a closed adoption because I just wanted to, cut this
and move on.
Yeah. And move
I remember
on.
you saying that.
Yeah. And the adoptive mom was the one that came to me and was like, I've been doing a lot of research and I think open adoption is going to be best, but I'm going to leave that up to you. And I remember we went and saw him a few days later. I forgot to mention that we went and saw him a few days after the hospital, and you and I were so nervous. We didn't know how we were going to, feel about it all, but ended up being a great experience with them. It was a bonding experience with him and with the adoptive parents.
Absolutely. And I remember this experience vividly actually. And I remember sitting on their sofa with them, and we had the ability to communicate with them and really set the ground rules for what was to come and the expectations. And we were open to their perspectives. They were open to ours. But I think there was a mutual agreement that there needed to be open communication, transparency,
100%.
and all those things. And we talked about those. And it might seem like a tough conversation, but it was a necessary conversation to have. And, we talked about the specifics, how often we wanted to hear from them, or whether or not we wanted to receive pictures, right? And how often we wanted to see them, even to those, those little details. And I think looking back in hindsight now, that conversation really did set the tone for our relationship as it stands now.
Yeah.
And I think if I were to suggest for anybody who may be in a similar situation, that they have that honest conversation with both parties, that they come to common ground, that they understand each other, they allow for open communication. And I know that there's been some uncomfortable conversations that you've probably had with the birth parents out of necessity.
Adoptive parents
out of necessity.
Yeah.
But those conversations need to happen.
Yeah.
And, we should be aware of feelings, but at the same time, we need to be aware of our own feelings.
Yeah.
And if we aren't able to communicate effectively both ways, this relationship isn't going to work.
Right.
And right now, we have an amazing and beautiful relationship with them. And it stems from that original conversation. And I'm so glad that we were able to communicate the way that we do now.
Yeah,
and
me too.
Gosh, it works so well. And I absolutely love where we are with this relationship with them.
Yeah.
And I love our child so much. You love our child so much. I love them so much. The feelings are mutual, back and forth. And I couldn't imagine a better relationship than we have with them right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, we also, a lot of people weren't very supportive of our relationship, especially because we placed and then we got pregnant again without being married. And I think a lot of people wonder, like, how did you guys make it work with everything that you guys have gone through? And I think it stems down to, we were still really young when we got married. We still had things that we need to work through. But over the years, we've learned to, like you said, have open communication. And I think that's important in every relationship. I think that truly is the answer to a healthy relationship, is just open communication, no matter what. Sometimes those conversations really hurt.
Well, they can be difficult.
They're very difficult. But as soon as you guys are on the same page and you don't allow anything to hinder your relationship, you're 100% transparent. You open up a place of vulnerability between the two of you so you can have a healthy relationship. And I think if we didn't learn that from early on, if we didn't have those hard talks. And I mean, there were things that went on that, and we don't need to get into detail, but there were things that went on when I was pregnant. There were things that went on afterwards that you and I had to forgive each other. We both did things that were, we are still trying to figure everything out. I read a quote where it says, forgiveness is not a feeling. Forgiveness is a choice. And as soon as you make that choice to forgive someone, it doesn't have to have a hold on you anymore. You chose to forgive me. I chose to forgive you. And now you and I have built this beautiful life, and we have 4 beautiful children that we get to raise together. And I tell you this all the time. I could not do this life with anyone else because we grew together. We were both very immature and did some really dumb things, but we took it as, just like everything in life, we took it as a challenge. We took it as, something that we wanted so bad, and we wanted it to work, that we put all of our energy into it. And now we've created this life that, I mean, I can't imagine anything else.
It's everything that I've ever wanted.
Yeah, same. And so, thank you for being there through those tough times. And thanks for
making me.
That's true. I kind of forced you, huh? I kind of forced you to marry me.
I'm glad that you did.
Cool. Thanks. But I am too. I'm glad that we made this work, and I'm so glad that we have, this relationship with our birth son and our children and with each other. And it's been a long road, and we still have so much to work on. Always. But adoption has truly been a blessing in our life.
It has. And because of that, because of our story, we've been able to have conversations with many other people who are in similar situations.
Right.
Though our story is unique, adoption is very common, and we've had the ability to really affect the lives of many people through our experiences and our ability to help navigate theirs as well. And so that's been for me the really the coolest thing about our experiences, the connection that we have with a lot of different people now.
Well, and even like this adoption agency, it is insane to me. And I think starting to work here, how everything falls into place. If you truly want something, if you have good intentions, good things are going to happen to you. And honestly, this job kind of fell into my lap. It came from Molly. She was my young ones leader in Mississippi when we lived there with my dad, who was in the Air Force. She was my young women's leader. And then she was a person that reached out to me and said, hey, would your sister want to adopt? And then that whole situation happened. And then she also came to me and said, hey, I think you'd be so great at this job. You should just come apply. And, Heidi's sitting over here, and I'm going to get emotional talking about you. I've made a best friend through adoption. She's an adoptive mom. I'm a birth mom, but we find so much common ground. We have a lot of respect for each other. And even like within the agency, I have ties with a lot of the people that work there. One of the social workers is best friends with my aunt, and she grew up with her. Another one is a sister of your best friend. So we're all like a big family. It's
we've mentioned this before, divine intervention, and I've seen that glow in you since you've been hired by the Active Love Adoption Agency. Yeah. And I'm just excited to see what our future looks like. This podcast is fairly new, but I think that we're doing good things. And I think the goal with this podcast is for our listeners to connect.
Yeah.
And in doing so, we have to be vulnerable. And I think the stories that you've been able to share with people have been just that. And I've been extremely proud of you for allowing yourself to do that. And I've seen the growth that you've had. And I think that it's really done some awesome things for our relationship.
Me too. And yeah, it's been hard. I mean, it's kind of forced me to deal with things that I thought I had already worked through. So I'm eternally grateful because it's just helped me, grow even more. And yeah. And Ryan, thank you for being here today. It was really special to share this with you. And to all of our listeners, we appreciate you guys listening to our story. We truly hope that this podcast touches a lot of people, not just our story, but the stories that have come before us. And we hope that it helps you in your adoption journey. I hope that it gives you a little bit more clarity. I hope it helps you not feel so alone, because we are all going through hard things, and adoption is one of those things that is so special and is so unique to each of us. And we're hoping that, you know, by sharing these stories, we're going to help you along your journey.
And go get yourself a Build-A-Bear.
And go get a Build-A-Bear. They should sponsor us. Just kidding. Or maybe that's a good idea. Maybe we'll reach out.
Well, thanks for having me, Kens. I love you.
I love you too.